The concept selection matrix is a tool that lets us take a set of concepts, for instance, these 10 that we generated for the ice cream scoop example, and evaluate them in a way that we can narrow the set of alternatives to a relatively few that we could expand on and evaluate further. As its name implies, the concept selection matrix has as its heart a matrix. The columns of the matrix are the concepts that we're evaluating. So for instance, we might call these A, B, C, and D. It's sometimes nice to draw a little sketch or to put the textual description of the concept at the head of each column. The rows of the matrix are the criteria. I like the criteria to be the key needs. So in this case, I've shown 4 key needs, and almost always there are 3 additional criteria that apply in the design of almost any artifact, and they are cost, or some measure of economic efficiency of delivering the artifact. Wow, that is how interesting, fundamentally interesting, novel, or unexpected is the concept. And elegance and beauty. Now you should remember that when we talked about what makes for a good concept, we said first and foremost it meets the needs, it has low cost or is efficient in terms of the value it delivers, it has some wow, and it's elegant and beautiful. So those form the criteria for the selection matrix. Our concepts are the columns, and what we do in evaluating in using the matrix is to evaluate each concept with respect to each criterion. So for instance, if we were to take cost as the criterion, we might say, well, the least expensive concept is a square. This is obviously the most expensive because it has all these extra corners, and maybe circles and triangles are about equally expensive to produce. And the convention that I like to use for representing that goes something like this. I give a plus for the square, I give a minus for the arrow, and then I use just a check to indicate the midpoint of the scale. So I have just a simple scale, the midpoint, which I indicate with a check. You could also use a 0 if you wanted, and a plus to indicate that it's better, and a minus to indicate that it's worse. So note that even though I use the term cost here, these are the convention I like is that the criteria are worded such that, or interpreted such that, a plus means the concept is better with respect to that criterion, and a minus means that it's worse with respect to that criterion. So once you've done that for all the other concepts, for all the other criteria, you can then sum up the net score. So in just this fanciful example, concept A, the triangle, had 3 pluses. Concept D, the arrow, had a minus, and B and C were tied in the middle with a net zero, effectively a net 0. So that's the idea conceptually. Now what I'd like to do is show you the idea for the ice cream scoop, and I'm going to go ahead and use a Google Doc spreadsheet to make this a little easier. So here you can see a concept selection matrix for the ice cream scoop implemented as a spreadsheet, and that's certainly easier in terms of creating a digital document and computing the tally. But just to be clear about what's done here, the 10 concepts from the exploration we did are shown here. They're labeled A through J, and I've put the descriptive titles here as well. Now in a spreadsheet, it's a little bit hard to add the sketch here, although that's nice, and some of you, if you're clever with how to insert an image, can figure out how to do that. But the important thing is that you list your concepts as the columns. And then the criteria, remember I said that the categories of criteria were first the key needs, and then almost always for most settings you care about cost, you care about the wow factor, and you care about elegance and beauty. Now the key needs, you can't put all of the needs, or it's unwieldy to put all of the needs in your selection matrix. So typically you want to pick the few that are most important and that best differentiate your concept. So here I put the 3 key needs I put for the scoop are first, that it's quick and easy to use, and that's a little bit of a catch-all around the ergonomics and ease of use of the scoop. Second, that the scoop is effective in removing all of the material from the container. That is, it can get into all the corners and cracks in order to remove all the material without having to use an extra spoon. And the third criterion, the third key need, is that the scoop lets the user create a nice shape for the ball, since that's one of the things that an ice cream scoop does. And then you can see here I've put in my subjective judgment as to the relative performance of the 10 concepts with respect to the 3, 4, 5, 6 criteria. Again, I use the convention in a spreadsheet of a +1 for better than, a -1 for worse than, and I use a 0 to represent the midpoint of the scale. So this scale has only 3 values: even or parity, +1, and -1. And when you do this, you should make sure that your scale you do a reality check, which is that your best concept is a 1, your worst concept is a -1, and the ones in the middle are a 0, and that scale is applied in a consistent way across the concepts. Now, in some cases, it makes sense to add some notes, so that's easily done in the spreadsheet. So I made an annotation here that the reason that the swoop scoop is okay with respect to this criterion is that you can use the back of the handle to get into the corners. And in this one, I noted that while the punch and twist doesn't create a very nice ball, some people might perceive that cylindrical plug shape to be interesting. So that is maybe a questionable rating with respect to that criterion. Then what you do is a simple tally, which is to just sum the values in the column, and that gives you a net score. Now, if you notice, 4 of these concepts all had a tied score of 1. The punch and twist, the claw, the push and pivot, and the twist ball. And one of them, the swoop scoop, had a high value of 4. Now, there's a couple things to note here. One is that you shouldn't get too excited at this point, in that this is a very rough approximation. Yes, the swoop scoop has a lot of promise, but we haven't even tried it yet to know if it works. So we wouldn't want to bet exclusively on this concept at this point. The other thing to note is that as you look at this concept E, you realize that it's conceptually very similar to the swoop scoop. In fact, the only real difference is that the push and pivot has a rectangular form to the shovel, and the swoop scoop has a cylindrical form to the scoop or the shovel, and a spherical form. And so they're actually quite similar, and I decided that in going forward here, it made sense to focus on these 5 concepts, but that I wouldn't prototype concept E because it was so similar to concept G. And so that really leaves me with 4 concepts that I'm taking forward, the swoop scoop, the twist ball, the claw, and the punch and twist as the 4 concepts that would result from the selection matrix. Now, the more left brain among you have at least 2 objections or concerns about this method. The first is you say, well, wait a second, this implies that all of these criteria are equally important. What if I decide that having the nice shape to the ball is not nearly as important as having it be quick and easy? Wouldn't it make sense to somehow weight the quick and easy greater than the nice shape to ball? And the answer is absolutely. And I'm going to show you as an optional video a tool called the scoring matrix, which allows you to add weightings to these criteria. You might also observe or say, hey, wait a second, there's only 3 levels of evaluation here, from +1 to -1 with 0 in the middle. That's not nearly enough resolution for me to distinguish across 10 different concepts. I hear you on that, and that's also a weakness that's addressed in the concept scoring matrix. Now, those of you who are more right brain have 2 objections yourselves. The first is that, hey, wait a second, we can't really reduce everything in life to a quantitative evaluation, and I'd really like to make a more holistic judgment of the qualities of these concepts. And I hear you on that, and I think it's good discipline to see if you can get the concept selection matrix to be consistent with your intuition. That suggests that you've been able to capture what's really behind your intuition, and that will benefit you when you go to communicate your rationale to other people, maybe to the more left brain of the stakeholders that you have to deal with. And some of you will also object that, hey, wait a second, aren't you just cooking these results to make it consistent with what you really want the answer to be? And again, and quite similarly, I would say, if you can get the selection matrix to be very consistent with your intuition, then it's a nice way of codifying what it is that your intuition is telling you, and that will serve well to document your results and to communicate to others.